Book Week is certainly a significant event in the annual calendar of any school year. So welcome to this particular webinar where Jenny will be providing you with an overview of links for support material on the shortlisted titles and their authors, as well as some strategic tools to help engage students in their reading experience. I'm Karen Bonanno, the founder and managing director for EduWebinar, and I will be your host for this broadcast. Just give you some introduction to Jenny in case you don't know Jenny. Jenny has worked in education for over 35 years, and her experience has encompassed primary and secondary teaching, teacher librarianship, university lecturing and departmental leadership in ICT integration. Currently, Jenny is employed as an adjunct lecturer for Charles Sturt University in the School of Information Studies, and she also manages the social media content for the Children's Book Council of Tasmania in a volunteer capacity. Jenny is also the Tasmanian sales representative for INT Books, and so she's well positioned to provide us with the information for this broadcast. Before I begin to hand over to Jenny, just some operational matters because many of you have not been into this space before. Just note that, first of all, the views that Jenny gives you are hers, and you'll need to take that information, do a little bit more investigation and see how you can apply it to your particular school, particularly as the Book Week is starting to get a lot of interest happening. The other element is that EduWebinar does not give permission for any capture, recording or reproduction of this webinar in any format. So Jenny, it's over to you now, and we'll get underway.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome everybody tonight. Tonight's session is focusing on digital resources to engage students with Book Week, and because of that focus there are a vast number of websites that I will present but not cover in depth this evening. So to facilitate your access to those resources, I have put together a handout that captures all the web links and the names of the sites organised in the same structure and sequence as this presentation this evening. So that means that this evening you can sit back and listen and observe, but you don't need to be scrabbling around trying to write down web addresses or website names because you will be given all of those. Tonight we will cover the shortlist itself and resources that directly support each of the individual titles. We will look at general Book Week resources that are available, the theme for Book Week this year, which is Books Light Up Our World, and an overview of some sites, tools and apps that will help you make curriculum links in your school. So just starting off with the Children's Book Council, that they obviously are in control of Book Week and all the shortlist, but they also provide a range of resources on their website. So if you haven't actually been into the Children's Book Council of Australia's website, it's worth a look. It has the shortlist on the day of the announcements. That's the Friday before schools start celebrating Book Week in their schools. At midday the shortlist is announced. You'll be able to retrieve that off the website as well as through various media sources that will be pumping it out. They also cover the notable books, which I'm not dealing with tonight, and they have a number of member resources. The branches of Children's Book Council of Australia are also linked off their home site, and this is the recommended place for you to buy Book Week merchandise. If you can get it through your branch, then they usually get some sort of financial benefit from that. But if you can't do that, then you can order directly from the homepage of the CBCA. For many years they've published a journal called Reading Time that had reviews. That's now is available online, and it covers and has reviews of most of the shortlisted titles there, and it's free to access, so that's always worth having a look. We'll get right into it now, starting off looking at the shortlisted books in the older readers category. Nearly all of the shortlisted titles have author sites and book reviews available, and many of them have teachers' resources and teaching ideas as well. Author sites provide biographical information, other works by the authors, which can be a great stimulus for further reading, and often there are other gems such as guidance and tips on writing, publishing and illustrating. The publisher and author teacher's notes are generally to a very high standard with strong connections to relevant curriculum areas. So links to these sites are provided throughout this PowerPoint that you're watching tonight, and I'm leaving it for you to explore these at your leisure at a later time. Tonight my main focus is on specific resources that can add breadth or depth to your engagement with the material, and also some interesting and alternative curriculum connections. So the bubbles on the left of each category page, they provide some indicators that highlight such elements that I will be exploring. So we'll start looking now at the individual titles in the older readers category, starting off with Nonna and Me. There are some terrific resources to go with this. You won't have all read these books, obviously, because these ones are aimed at secondary students, but even if you're working in a primary school, this is an opportunity to read some really high quality children, young adult literature. So it's a good opportunity to broaden your reading scope and to have a look yourself at some of the interviews, book trailers, etc. that have been prepared for the older readers category that might give you some ideas and some inspiration for how you could do something similar working in a primary sector. So throughout the resources for all the books across all the categories, there are a number of interviews available on the different shortlisted titles. These interviews, some of them are video, some are audio files, so from ABC broadcasts, and some are done in text with questions and answers written up. So, and they all provide models that you could share with students as inspiration for writing scripts, developing their own questions and conducting interviews. So that you could consider the different audiences that they could do these with and the types of interviewees that could be considered, such as somebody acting as the main character in a book or being a reader to report on that book. So one of the older reader titles has a fan review on YouTube that might give students some inspiration about how to review a book. All the books have potential connections to the curriculum. Tonight I'm going to explore two titles in depth to provide some starting points and just to give you an idea of how you could look at just one title in each category that you deal with in your school to go dig deeper and allow students to explore a book in some depth. So the first of these titles is Are You Seeing Me? So we'll have a look at that in a bit more depth to give you some ideas of what you can do. I have to say that this is my favourite book across all the categories. I just adored this story. It kept me engaged from start to finish, and it's well worth reading for yourself, as one of the main characters has autism, is on the autism spectrum, and his sister has become his principal carer. They are young adults, twins and aged 18 at this story, but it doesn't have content in it that would be inappropriate for any teenagers to read. So this is a great story across for secondary students. Has great potential as a class or group novel for Year 9 to 10 English classes, as it has both main characters share the storytelling, so it has different voices in it. The publisher's teaching notes for this book are excellent, and there's a detailed coverage particularly to address English outcomes. I've highlighted some other aspects that are more about the content of the book and themes that run through it, and these would engage students, and particularly in regard to Perry, the autistic boy's obsessive interests. So there's lots of inquiry possibilities in this book covering science and geography. Those twins travel through parts of Canada, so there's a road trip. The teaching notes actually list all the towns that they go to, so that gives you a great starting point. You don't have to find them in the book. Perry's obsession with earthquakes is a fantastic springboard for lots of different study, and some of the places that they visit in the book will also are all real, so there's lots of starting points for further investigations. The link that I've provided there from the US Geological Society has a fantastic kids section that if you're doing this sort of work with your teenagers, make sure they don't get put off by the term kids, because it's quite complex in some aspects and would be very informative. There's also, of course, the health issue side of this in terms of autism awareness. So a great starting point is the Australian website that deals with autism, and that has further links, video clips and lots of supporting information. One of the aspects of the book that I particularly enjoyed was Perry's fascination with mythical sea creatures, and the Ogopogo is a creature that lives in one of the Canadian lakes that they go to visit, and that in itself provides a terrific springboard going into North American Indian legends. The Okanagan legend can be viewed on YouTube. There's various documentaries about searching for this lake monster, and then you could spin off into lots of different things from mythical beasts. And from that, of course, looking at, is it real? So there's great starting points in this book for considering what's fact and what's fiction. You know, what's the crossing off point from myth and reality. So there's opportunities there to actually take your students into examination of hoax websites and being able to evaluate and make decisions about the accuracy and credibility of the information there. So just looking at one book, there is so much that you can do with it from a classroom perspective, and to inspire teachers and to get the students reading. So that just gives you an example of something that you could be picking up with just one of the books. Other books in this category include The Incredible Adventures of Cinnamon Girl, that has a very passionate fan review on YouTube. There's actually more than one. I picked the one that was what I considered was the most valid and sensible review. One of them is a little over the top. But great teaching notes for this most unusual book. It does have a strong female focus in it, this story. The Minnow similarly would be more interesting for female readers, but it has a great book trailer to watch and some interesting teaching notes, and I refer to it later on again as well, as with The Protected, which is a quite powerful story about bullying, and definitely probably for older students. So that's just a bit of a brief overview of the older readers and the links that are available there. There's more book trailers, there's author websites, and of course the teaching notes to support the study of the books. Moving on into the section for the younger readers, there was quite a bit of discussion on AusTunet about the suitability of Two Wolves, whether it was for primary or secondary. My reading of it, I felt that primary students would be able to read it and engage with it quite well. It's fairly brutal in terms of family life and what the two children go through. And I guess it's a bit of a borderline. It could be used in both ways. What I think stands out in many of the books is the use of evocative language, and you would expect this in books that have been selected for book awards, because the quality of the writing is a key criteria for the Children's Book Council. Many of the teaching notes address the English curriculum in some depth, so the books, as we go through these titles in a moment, you will see that there's a lot of them have that curriculum support with suggested pathways for English, and I flesh out some of those in the latter part of this presentation tonight. So looking at these books here, let's just have a look on the next slide at some of the resources that are available for them. With Two Wolves, there is a book trailer. Now this is the only book trailer available for in the younger readers category, and if you were using that as a model for students, I would be very mindful of the age of the students that were watching it. So but it is very interesting as it's done as a breaking news report. So because the two children go missing and there's a great hunt on for them, and so it's an interesting way of capturing the essence of a book that's a little different from most book trailers that have quiet music or rowdy music and snapshots. This is a different approach, so that's quite inspirational in that way. But later on in the presentation I do show you a range of websites with book trailers that you could use across multiple ages. The interview with Bill Condon is in print, and it's an easy one for students to access and read through if they wanted to develop some interview questions themselves. And the Freya Blackwood website is terrific, and a number of her books are actually captured in an online format where you can click through each page to have a look at, and that's a terrific way to examine the way she puts the text together and her different illustrations, though the Cleo stories are not part of that collection that you can read online, but a terrific inspiration for the illustrative aspects of Freya's work. And I've just added an activity there, a Pinterest board that has lots of links to making different sorts of kids' necklaces, because that's the focus of the first story in that two-story collection of Cleo stories. I am hoping that most of you online have read a number of the books that are relevant to your area, but if you haven't, perhaps hopefully this will be some inspiration to go away and do so. So I have to, just a little aside here, that now that I'm no longer working in a school library, I find I have time to read all of the books, which is a nice change. It is a struggle when you are working full-time to be able to read them all. The remaining 3 titles in the younger readers category include a work from Stephen Herrick. This one is not in verse. Much of his work is. Bleak Boy and Hunter Stand Out in the Rain is a fantastic book about 2 boys that do not get on well at school, and there's bullying involved, but we get a really deep insight into both characters, and we watch the shifting sands as their relationship grows and develops and actually becomes a friendship. There's a terrific audio interview with Stephen Herrick from the ABC radio. It's quite long, and he covers a number of his books in that, and a number of he does write for young adults. So if you were going to use the audio of that, I would suggest that for primary school students, that you would probably not have them sit through all of it. It might be a bit too long for them. And I think the Bleak Boy and Hunter section is at the end, so you might want to just capture that part of it. Great teacher's notes to go with that book as well. And that one really targets the upper primaries, the grade 5s and 6s. Figgy in the World is my favourite of this collection in the younger readers, and we'll have a look at that in more depth in just a minute. Lots of resources to go with this. Tamsin has her own website. She's been to Ghana and taught in Ghana where the book is set, and she's a terrific YouTube clip about the book and the students that she worked with, and it captures some of the life in Ghana, including some photographs. So that's there's lots of supporting resources there. And the final book in the younger readers section, Withering by the Sea, which is just a delightful book to hold. It is done in an otherworldly style with ink illustrations and blue text, and it's a delight to read, with a terrific use of language as well, and there's terrific teacher's notes to go with that too. We'll just look now at Figgy in the World in a little bit of depth. I've unpacked this one to give you some ideas of some directions that you can go. Set in Ghana, there's some terrific opportunities to look at different languages. So students could be writing a glossary of the local terms that are used in the novel, and then they could use some technology to present and illustrate that. There's lots of reference to different money, so for older students in the primary school you could start to do a little bit of work on currency and world currencies and exchange rates and make some comparisons with the Australian dollar. So I've just provided a site there that deals with the Ghanaian money and the exchange rates there, but there's plenty of websites out there to help you. Within the book itself, there's a drumming and storytelling dance section that the kids are involved with, and that would provide a great springboard to look at some folk tales and storytelling that happen. So I've provided 2 links there. The World Stories site has retellings in English and Akan, which is the major, most common Ghanaian language, but there are many different languages. It's about 80 spoken in that country, and that's referred to several times in the book as they go from town to town and the local people speak different languages. So there's lots that you could talk about there, and it's good to see the Akan language written so they can do that. And the traditional Ghanaian storytelling is a YouTube clip where the dance and interaction of the children is part of the storytelling, and that's very reflective of the event that's in the book itself. So a great support for that one. And Anansi stories come from this part of Africa, so there's a wealth of information with Anansi stories, including print versions, and there's many online ones as well. So I didn't actually capture the online ones. I've given you a print one there that has the stories in text, and I think that site also has one video recorded retelling as well. A couple of other ideas for you if you're using Figgy in the World is to look at interviews. So you could use examples of the interviews that there are links for to do with other books that are covered in the shortlist, and use that as a stimulus for the students to develop some interview techniques, to perhaps interview Figgy about her adventures, or perhaps the grandmother who's left behind as Figgy goes out to seek the magic medicine that will make her grandma better. And then students could have a go at recording the interview using software such as Audacity. In the geography aspect, there's lots you could do finding out about Ghana. Finding a website with accessible information for the age of the students that would be reading this book, which is sort of grade 3 upwards, is a bit of a challenge. A lot of the sites are quite technical. The one that I've given you there has some, it's not too hard, and it also includes some video clips that make it more accessible for students. Another activity would be a mapping one where they could record the places that Figgy visits or travels through in her search for attempts to try and reach the United States. And on the handout I've actually listed the towns that she visits to, so if you're having to go and find them in the book, though the starting point of the story, Figgy's own hometown, is not actually named in the book. So looking now at the picture books of the year titles, there's a range of activities that can be stimulated from these books, from geography to working with words, more interviews, and some great art inspiration. And I should have actually made that art arrow also go to a couple of the other books. So the picture book shortlist has titles for all age groups, and they're an eclectic and stimulating selection, so they're very different. Perhaps the most fun, and with a strong underlying environment and sustainability message, is The Duck and the Darklings. And this book, written for primary school students but really engaging for all ages, has fantastic potential in a secondary school. So the use of language in this title is a highlight, and it resonates really strongly with those who love Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. Now, in preparing this presentation, I hadn't actually explored this book in thinking about web resources to support it, because I was my instant connection with it was in regard to Jabberwocky, and I just love looking at the various print versions of that poem and the titles that have been illustrated and comparing the illustrations. But this afternoon I actually went online, and there's some fantastic YouTube clips of Jabberwocky. There's a terrific mashup YouTube and it's a bit gruesome, where the Jabberwocky's beheaded. And there's also retellings by people such as Christopher Lee and Neil Gaiman. So you don't have any links for those, but if you wanted to investigate this book a little further, then you might like to go off and do a bit of a YouTube search on Jabberwocky to get a comparative text that would stimulate kids to play with the words in The Duck and the Darkling. Looking now in a little bit more depth for each of those books, 1 Minute Silence is a terrific starting point here, and all of these books would be inspirational for any secondary art teacher. So Michael Kimileri's website has some confrontational works on it, but it provides a fantastic gallery of his artwork, and they can be enlarged to examine his use of pencil and shading. So if you've got an interactive whiteboard to hand, then he actually explores a number of his own artworks and has a commentary on them. Stephen Michael King's website is a goldmine. It just has links to video clips of him at work and with his various artistic styles, and he has 3 books shortlisted, and the illustrations in each of them are very, very different. So they all provide great comparisons to look at different illustrative styles and how they apply to or support the telling of different sorts of stories. So other books in the Picture Book of the Year collection include Rivertime, which is a very soft, quiet, gentle story set on the Murray River. So I've just provided there, as an addition to the standard information that's available, a link to some River Murray educational photos. So that would help add a photographic and realistic portrayal of the route that the boy takes on the river. My Two Blankets is another example of Freya Blackwood's illustrations, a wonderful story about assimilation, refugees, and it has some terrific connections to language as well. All of those books, the teacher's notes and resources that are there, are really enough to get you going. Plenty of information there. The remaining 2 books in the Picture Book of the Year category include The Stone Lion, and the illustrations in that book are available as a slideshow on Ritva Voutila's website. So they're, once again, fantastic support for an art program to look in depth at the artwork in a book and to see how it unfolds. I haven't actually gone into the possibilities of looking at statues and gargoyles and those sorts of aspects, and the place of statues in front of buildings and their purpose. So there's potential there to go off in a completely different direction. And Fire, which has the most amazing language in it, that is just totally inspirational for poetry writing, and a really interesting YouTube clip from the illustrator Bruce Watley about drawing with your left hand, which he has done in illustrating this book. So that would be terrific to transfer into the classroom. So there's a range of things there that you can work with. The early childhood section has 6 delightful stories that will inspire discussion, inspire craft activities, and generally just be totally enjoyed. Well, as you move down to the lower end, you don't get the book trailers that you get with older readers as much, because young children tend not to watch book trailers, I guess. But there's a beautiful retelling of Pig and Pug by Alan Blavey, so that's worth looking out for. There's an interview of the authors for Go to Sleep Jessie, and there's a range of activities available for each of the books. Just before I move on to look at those activities in a bit more depth, Network Ed produces books with activities for Book Week, along with some others which I will refer to later, but they do have a sample of this 3 or 4 pages of their book for the early childhood section, so you might like, I've given you the link there for that. Looking a bit more closely at these books with Pig the Pug, as I said, the video clip of Blaby's reading, and the teacher's notes are terrific as well. Really useful, lots to do, and just a delightful little craft activity for a pug dog where you cut out and then use split pins to move the different parts. So that was just, I added that for a bit of fun. And Scary Night is a terrific fun little story about three creatures heading out through the deep dark forest to, well, I won't tell you where they're going because that would be a spoiler, but the sense of scariness is sort of maintained through most of the story, and there's a couple of activities available for that. So Scholastic, the publishers, have included some craft activities, and there's a one from the Little Book Club as well, so a bit of fun there that you can have with younger children. Other books in the early childhood section include Go to Sleep Jessie, and once again we have Freya Blackwood, so that's another opportunity to be comparing illustrative styles for the one illustrator to tell different sorts of stories. A House of Our Own has a printed interview with Bentley, the illustrator of this story, so it's nice to have an illustrator's perspective in an interview because they're different sorts of questions, so that provides a really good model from a different perspective. And I've just provided a link there on of YouTube. It's a list of YouTube, a collection of YouTube clips on building cubby houses for kids. So it's for kids to build the cubby houses. So it's things like tunnels and tents and those sorts of things. So they're all child-friendly and quite acceptable for young children to be looking at to inspire them in that. And the last two books in the early childhood section include Snail and Turtle, which is another Stephen Michael King work, and the terrific activities that I've highlighted here include doing comparisons and using Venn diagrams, and also some craft activities with turtles and snails, so a little bit to keep the children amused. And the last book in this section, Nonny the Pony Goes to the Beach, there's very little out there on this book, but there's lots on Nonny the Pony, so you could use that as inspiration, and I've provided you a link for that. The last section is that we're going to look at in terms of the shortlist are the Eve Pownell Awards for Information Books, and these include book trailers, documentaries, activities and interviews across the books. And I won't spend a lot of time talking about these except to highlight with Emu on the first of the books in that list is I've added a link there to some really nice Emu and a nice paid site that has craft activities for emus, but also some information as well. And I think there's a dance to walk like an emu. There's nothing available that I can find on Audacity apart from the PDF version of the book itself, but because of its focus and with Australians in wartime, many of your students are probably actually engaged with this book during Anzac Day, and you will have some related activities to go with that. Moving on to the A to Z of Convicts, I just think this is a stunning book, and it has a range of wonderful resources to go with it, including an interview, the author's own website, and links to the historical research that he did and the artifacts that he used. And I've added a couple of links to sites where you can look up convict records and explore the Tasmanian convict list, because this is set in Tasmania, of course. And the Coming of Age collection of short stories, which is aimed at older readers in the secondary area, has a really interesting book trailer presented by the editors, so it has very strong personal perspectives presented in that. And the last two books look at, of course, Mary's Australia, and I've added a site there that is just devoted to the black dress that is features in that story, and a great stimulus for looking at documentaries as Tea and Sugar Christmas. So there are several documentaries out there on the tea train that travelled across the Nullarbor. So a bit of an opportunity, I think you could model this as for students to then go and look at other books in the non-fiction section, or any of the picture books or other books that they've explored from the shortlist, to actually find some factual information and present a documentary. And of course these all directly relate to the history curriculum because they're all set in the past. So the train travelled in the past, and some of the documentaries are in black and white, show the building of the railway, etc. So terrific connections there. Now I'm just going to pause for a minute to just see if there's any questions coming up that we could answer very quickly. We haven't got a lot of time for questions, but I've posed some for you, and I apologise for the grammatical error in the first box, for you to be thinking about how you can use all this information, because there's so much of it. So there are lots and lots of links here. You can't do everything. So you need to be thinking of ways that you can disseminate this, bring your teachers on board, and I would suggest also how you can bring your students on board, particularly older students in the primary school and your secondary students. So, you know, how they can be involved in driving some of the book week activities or engagements that you could have, or using English classes for developing book trailers. That could be done on the younger books, so that the students are comparing texts, doing some background research, and then developing their ICT skills to disseminate that information, and that could be shared with the local primary school, or if you're in a K-12 school across the campus. So lots of information here that you need to be thinking about how you can use it. Be mindful of that as we continue into the more practical section for the remainder of this session.
Yeah, Jenny, there's one question about which bookseller is selling these at the best price. I mean, is it shop around or?
Yeah, pretty much. There's yeah, it's really just a case of going online and having a look, or supporting your local bookseller. It's really comes down to what your choice is for that. Your local bookseller won't have them on special. They can't afford to. So your bulk buyers that sell online can give you a deal. So I think really, if you just put in some search terms and go looking, that would be the best way to go. Some of them will give you, I think I saw someone had 20% off if you bought bulk copies, but not everybody does that. So you're just going to have to go shopping. It might be a question you could ask on a network to see what other people are finding. Other questions in there. So looking at the theme itself, Books Light Up Our World, the slide that's up at the moment just covers the first three sites are sources of inspiration for the theme. So Audrey Nay's Pinterest collection, so most of you I think would understand how Pinterest works, so you can, it's really a way of just capturing links to different websites. So I've got two there, the two Pinterest collections that are covering the theme that you can follow, and then the Scoop It by Petra Pollins. So the name of the Scoop It site is Book Week 2012, which is when she first established it, but she has current information for this year's shortlist. The little sticker there is from the Children's Book Council's merchandise. So they have, I think that's terrific merchandise this year. I think it looks fantastic with their Firefly. The other things that I've listed on this slide that you can go back to in your own time are resources that you can buy, and there's no doubt there's more of them, but these are the ones that I have seen advertised over the last month. Though I did go into the Zart Arts site and their art and craft book was out of print. I don't know if they're reprinting it, but they always have some amazing art ideas for the picture books. No, so if you're interested in that art aspect, you'd need to go and investigating. Moving on now to the next site, and probably the most famous person in terms of providing resources for teacher librarians in Australia, the Book Chook, Compliments of Susan Stevenson. So she's put up a list of activities and material to support Book Week that I'm not going to really talk to, except that there's activities, challenges, ideas for performance and ideas for display. So they're all up there now for you to look at. And so you can investigate those at your leisure. And she also has, as you can see on the next slide, prepared a very short slide share on the theme and her interpretation of what that theme means. And I think this is terrific inspiration for students to do the same sort of thing. So you could throw this theme out to them and get them to go sourcing some copyright-free material and resources that where they could present or prepare some PowerPoints on the theme. Another important and very useful resource person is Mrs. Mack. So I've given you the list to Mrs. Mack's website, and she always includes lots of practical little ideas that you can do with different books. So give that a burl and have a look at that. And the Book Week for Beginners site that runs each year. So if you're a new teacher librarian or someone working in a library or just keen on Book Week and you've never done anything before on it, then it's worth having a look at that site too. I'm now just going to spend a little bit of time talking about book trailers. So I have a whole list of sites there. There's 5 sites that I've selected, and I've given you a brief outline of the key points in each of those. If you're in a school where book trailers are commonly made and prepared, you won't need a lot of this. You won't need this information probably at all. But if you're new to book trailers and that idea of making a little, it's like meant to be like a film trailer, a little short advert promotion for a book, then these sites that I've picked are the best that I could find for giving you the educational purpose and focus, tips on how to create them, examples that you can show to students to give them a framework to work from. Some of them include rubrics, some of them include links to sites that will provide copyright-free audio and copyright-free images. So it really covers everything that you could possibly need to develop some book trailers. But you need to, if it's something that you're new to, either you would need to spend some time looking at it, or with the older students you could provide some of those sites or some links to get them up and having a go at learning how to do it themselves. So just in terms of some software to do the book trailers, on the next slide I've just listed some apps that probably the most commonly used or known apps would be Animoto and Prezi. Both are available. I've got a little I there for iPads and a little A for Androids. So both of those pieces of software can be used on both. Lumify is a little video capturing app that's quite reasonably new for iPads, and something similar is the Mini Movie Slideshow Maker, though it uses images rather than shooting film. But basically if the students have got iPhones, access to iPhones or similar, then they'll be able to take some little mini movies. So they could be doing that for interviews that they could then put into a book trailer if they wanted to. Some of the key software that you can use for book trailers includes that are listed there. EasyVid is only available for Windows platforms, and that's well worth a look. It's interesting. So you find it online and download the software and you can use that. So it provides an alternative to PhotoStory. online sources. Powtoon's great fun to have it for students to use, and there's lots of YouTube clips. You can just go and do YouTube clips to how to use any of these. Stupidflix is a terrific piece of software, and just to do a presentation in Google Drive. So, and the picture underneath is from Google Drive, Prezi, and I've listed my favourite books, the ones that I'm hoping will be winners in the book awards. So the other thing that you need to think about with your book trailers are the potential hazards, the things that you need to think about when students make book trailers, and basically where they're going to go. So if they're going to be published online, and what you know about student permissions, how they're going to be accessed, so that comes down to thinking about the audience. You need to think about the music and images and copyright issues that come with those, how students need to attribute the content that they include, the difference between using a free site and a paid site, educational, paying for an educational license. So lots of things. If you're going to be publishing the students' productions, you need to be thinking about. So I've just sort of snapped them up there to make you think of some of the ones that you need to think through. So a bit of an alert. I'm not going to tell you what to do because it depends on the software that you're using and your school's rules and user agreements and parent permissions, etc. But they are some things to think about. Just as a bit of an inspiration to get kids keen on doing book trailers, I've just provided you with 3 sites there. The Sunshine State Young Readers Awards in Florida, they put together a whole series of little book trailers as a movie presentation. Great to watch and to give students some ideas about how to go about this. There's some Australian examples of some book trailers, and the Allen Unwin link is for young adult ones, but the Random House link includes some book trailers for younger students, and the BookChook link at the bottom has picture books. So if you want to show your young kids some book trailers of other books, these are not shortlisted titles, then that's a good starting point to save you searching on YouTube. Just some final ideas that things to think about for other ways you can explore and celebrate Book Week and have students working is doing word pictures. So I think everybody's aware of Wordle, but there are lots of other tools that do different things. So I've given you a link that gives you 9 of those, and I've provided you with 3 examples. So Image Chef, Tag Crowd and Word It Out are all different word picture generators, and they all work on a Mac. So Wordle can have issues on a Mac. So that just provides some different alternatives, and you should be able to see from the examples that I've given that they actually do different functions. So a good way, particularly for older students, to start to critically select the tools that they're going to use to convey specific messages in their Wordles or their word clouds. Some tools for working with words. So lots of the books deal with language. So I've just provided you with a list of apps that are really good for doing things like poetry and encouraging kids to be creative in the way they capture or express their views about a book or text. So doing a poem based on using the language in Fire would be a fantastic task for any student at any age, really. In the centre, the visual poetry is a paid app for iPads, and that's and does word pictures, so it's like an iPad version of Wordle. So you mightn't be buying that for your whole school, but teachers, as a teacher, you might like to have that. And some ideas there for presenting lists, which is a key part of Protected if you're in a secondary, dealing with secondary text, so that's something a little different because lists are a significant part of that book. And using words, so words are played around with a lot. So minnow, withering by the sea, has some terrific words, and the idea of a word of a day, so that happens in Minnow, and there's some apps there that will help you do that, and also a couple of websites as well. So it's a little bit of inspiration for that. Book Faces is an activity. There's a great website there, but you really need to be quite careful about the age of the students that look at it. So the idea of a book face is that you find a book and you put your body in part to use the book to extend your body in some way so that it fits in. And when you go and explore the website, you'll see exactly what I mean. I replicated one with my frog and a book. So that gives you a bit of an idea. And I think secondary students would love to put together a whole series of book face images and share them online. And just finally, some bright ideas for Books Light Up Our World. And there's a list of different craft and scientific things that you could be doing around that theme. So I will leave you with those as a final point, that there's just some links there to some great different ideas that would help support your students' engagement, but also perhaps to develop some resources and materials for displays in the library to deal with a theme. To see if there's any questions.
There are a few questions, particularly where people have been asking about some of the applications, some of those apps, whether they're free or whether they're paid for. I think in your presentation you did have whether they were free or whether there were prices.
I think the visual poetry, it needs to be bought. The work on the Working with Aids with Words, they're all free. So I do say free and then indicate with an I and an A whether it's iPad and Android. Most of them are both. And I'm just going backwards up here. And the ones for book trailers were all free as well. I didn't actually add free on there, but I deliberately looked for free apps, because if you've got your students using these materials, these apps, purchased apps can be a problem. So often they're better, but may not be within the school's budget. So I did actually go looking for free apps that you could use. Any other questions, Karen, that I've missed?
Here Victoria's got about having started doing some book trailers just to be viewed by students and parents. Is there anything I need to consider?
Yeah, you still need to ensure if they're using images and commercial music that it's copyright free or that it's correctly attributed. So if it's not a lot of the links that I've given on the book trailer pages, there's one of those links has a detailed list of resources of sites that provide music and images that students can use. So when you get your handout, go back to that list, the one that had the 5 websites directly to do with book trailers, and go through those carefully, and you will see that there's one and it states that it has the sorts of information that you need. So that'd be the main things to think about, whether the students were actually following, addressing copyright. And I'm trying to look which one. The first one. So it has audio and image sources, the first link on that book trailers slide.
Okay, yeah, and everybody will get that who's been online tonight. Just one final question, and then we'll move to closing. Someone's making some comments about Figgy in the World. They recommended it to a Year 6 teacher. This is Susan, and she was wondering. She said that even though it's written from an 8-year-old's point of view, I thought the themes might suit the older children. And what did you think about that?
It would depend a little bit on the class and how receptive they were to having stories read aloud to them. Figgy is such a joyfully optimistic child that she's quite inspirational, and a lot of the challenges that she deals with are so far beyond our comprehension that I do think older students could engage with it, but you might want to lead them into it first with some information about Ghana and the challenges in the country and the poverty, so that they actually have some grounding that would help them tune into the book when it was first started, because probably the first chapter is, they would think, oh, we're a bit old for this, but then they would become engaged as they moved on. So I think some introductory work first would help with that book, and even using the website, the Tamsin's website, as a starting point might be all that's needed for the kids to think, oh yeah, we want to find out more about this. So I think it would work, but you need to make it work. Anything else?
No, we'll pick up some of these because we've got some people wanting to know where they're going to get the handout and also where they may be able to see the recording of this again. What will happen is the information will eventually be going into this spot here, if you can follow me through, to our Hints and Tips archive. So next week, look out for that replay. It'll be in the top part here, so the Robo Girls one will go down a bit and Jenny's will sit here, which means you can come back and look at the webinar presentation again if you want to do that, if you want to revisit even though you've got the PDF file. So it takes about a week for us to render the video into a movie format, and that's where you'll find it. So it's in our Hints and Tips webinar archive and you'll be able to access. So hopefully everyone's got sufficient information there to be able to get access to this at a later stage. So Jenny, any final comments from you before we close?
Yeah, just too quickly, somebody said, how much research have you undertaken for this wonderful presentation? I have to admit, the first section I had prepared for Children's Book Council of Tasmania, and that got presented alongside with, I presented with the judge, so she talked about the books in depth and I provided links. So that happened in Tasmania, and then I expanded it for this session so that there was a stronger educational focus. And the other thing I just wanted to say too, the handout doesn't actually include, I only included content where there were web links, so it doesn't include the names of the apps that were covered in the latter part of this presentation. So if you need to go back and look at those, you'll have to wait for the recording to come back up. So other than that, that was all. It's lovely to have so many people on board tonight.
Okay, thanks very much, and we'll say good night, and people are saying thank you, thanks Jenny and Karen, great information. And so if there's any questions there that haven't been answered tonight, I will get those to Jenny and she'll be able to follow up with you specifically about some of the concerns that you might have. So thanks for attending, and I hope that you've enjoyed your experience here with us.